Here are the notes for 4.10 day 2. So this is once again writing a quadratic model to represent a real-world problem. So the other day you guys learned how to basically graph, or how to write a quadratic equation given a graph. Now what you guys are going to do is write a quadratic equation or model given some data points. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's figure this out together. So in Algebra 1, you guys learned how to use a graphing calculator to find a linear regression. Remember, that's another way of saying the best fitting line. Now what you guys are going to be learning is how to use the graphing calculator to find the best fitting quadratic model or a quadratic regression. Okay, let's do our first example here. So it says the table shows the height of a baseball hit with x representing time in seconds, so we can see that from our table here, and y representing the baseball's height in feet. So you can also see that from our table. Now we need to use a graphing calculator to find the best fitting model for the data. Now when they ask that, that means we need to find a quadratic equation. And then in order to do that, we will have to use a graphing calculator. Okay. So I'm going to put up the graphing calculator up here so we can do that. Here we go. So in order to plug those values into our graphing calculator, what we first have to do is press the stat key. Now at any time if I'm going too fast, make sure you pause the video and kind of work through it. Okay. So the stat key is here in this third row. And what we want to do is edit, because we're going to put these values into our list. We press enter. Now notice we should have an L1 and an L2. Now with our L1, what we want to do is plug in the x values into our L1. But notice we already have values here. So if that happens, I'm going to left arrow over and then go up to L1 and make sure it's highlighted. Now to get rid of any of these values in our L1, we're going to press the clear button. Please do not press the delete. That gets rid of the entire list, even L1. So we're going to press the clear button and enter. It just gets rid of all the numbers. Okay, let's go back to our table to figure out what is our L1. So in this case, your L1 will always be x. So we notice that our L1 here is our time. So all these values for our x, we're going to plug it into the graphing calculator. So we're going to plug in 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. So how we do that is we're going to press 0, and then you press enter. So every single time you want to plug in a value, you will press that value and then press enter afterwards. So we do 2 and enter, 4, enter, 6, enter, and 8, enter. Okay, now we got to do the same thing for our L2 or our list 2. So I need to right arrow over. I'm going to go all the way up, so I'm using the right arrow so I can highlight L2 or list 2. And once again, to clear this, or just to clear the numbers, we're going to press clear and enter. Okay, so now we got to go back to our table to figure out what are going to be the values for L2. Now your L2 will always consist of your y values, or basically the second part of your table. Okay, so for your x, or basically the first part of your table, it's always going to be L1. For your y, or the second part of your table, it's going to be L2. So now we're going to plug 3, 28, 40, 27, 26 into our L2. So just like we did before, we're going to go ahead and enter those values. So we press 3 and then enter. We'll do 28, enter, 40, enter, 27, and then 26. Now your L1 and L2 should line up. As we can see here, we have the same amount of numbers in our list 1 and the same amount of numbers in our list 2. Okay, now we're actually going to get that quadratic regression or the quadratic model. So once again, we go back to our stat key. And then now we're going to calculate. So we're going to right arrow over to calc. And because we're trying to figure out the quadratic regression, we're going to go to number 5 here where it says quad reg. That's our quadratic regression. So we're going to go all the way down arrow to number 5, so it's highlighted, and then press enter. Now you want to make sure your X list is L1 and your Y list is L2. Otherwise, it might say error or anything like that. Okay, now we go all the way down, so just down arrow basically, until calculate is highlighted, and then we press enter. So here, notice that our quadratic equation or quadratic regression is in standard form. And then our A, B, and C values they give to us, and we just plug it back into there. So our A value is negative 1.37, our B is 13.25, and our C is 4.8. So we're going to plug those values in for A, B, and C to write our quadratic model or quadratic regression. So our final answer here is going to be y equals, now don't forget the y equals because we are writing an equation, negative 1.325. Let me double check that's correct. Oh, it should be 375. Change that there. There we go, so 375. And make sure you have the x squared because we are writing a quadratic. Then plus our b value, if we go back to the graphing calculator, was 13.25. So we have plus 13.25, and we need an x there. And then plus our 4.8. That was our c value. So this whole thing we have here is our quadratic model, our best fitting model, or another way of saying it, our quadratic regression. Now, it's kind of doing like a part B here. It's asking us to use our model to find the height of the baseball after 9 seconds. Now, we look at this 9 seconds, and we kind of look back at our x and y. Well, seconds, which is time, is our x value. So 9 in this case is our x value, and what we are trying to find is our y value, the height. So what we're going to do so we can solve this is plug 9 back into the function or a model that we got. So we have y equals negative 1.375, and now we plug 9 in for x, and we're going to square that, plus 13.25, and we multiply that by 9 as well, and then plus 4.8. So now all we have to do to get our y value is plug this whole thing into our calculator, basically how we see it. So I'm going to go back here, and then I'm going to just clear this so we have more room so you guys can see. So we have negative 1.375. In parentheses, make sure you put the 9, and then we're squaring that. Then we have plus 13.25 times 9, make sure that's also in parentheses, and then plus 4.8. And we press enter. And then our final answer should be 12.675. So we have 12.675. Now, because it's a real world problem, we need to use our labels or units. And if we kind of go back to our sentences, it says the height is represented in feet. So make sure you put feet here. So our answer, whenever the baseball after 9 seconds, the height of it is 12.675 feet. Okay, now go ahead and make sure you work on the homework. If you need to come in before or after school because you still have questions, make sure you do that. And make sure during this video that you paused it if I was going too fast or you need to write something down.